If you remember streetcars, that is a streetcar system in St. Louis, you are, as they say, of a certain age. Interesting thing about getting older, you can deny it, you can fight it, but you can't really avoid it. Sometimes maybe you just want to go along for the ride. And that's what longtime St. Louis newsman and public radio host Don Marsh decided to do. And then he wrote a book about it. For this interview, I didn't have to go far. St. Louis Public Radio is just across the public media commons from the 9 network. And the interview subject? Well, somebody I've known since we both worked in the Channel 2 newsroom years ago. I sat down with Don Marsh in the St. Louis On the Air studio to talk about his book, Coming of Age, Liver Spots and All. So, Don, you've written another book.
Yes, another book.
What made you decide to write this particular topic about a humorous look at the wonders of getting old?
Well, they say write about what you know. So that was the genesis of this one. You know, I've just turned 80, and I started this a little before then, but I began to feel like I was getting older, which I was. The aches and pains and all the trials and tribulations that older people have. But I decided to kind of think about it in terms of more of a humorous adventure as opposed to something that I should be feeling sorry for myself. So I just sat down and started to write it and hoped that I could find some things that were funny about it, funny observations about things that I've seen, things that I feel. So that was the genesis of it. I guess I was bored.
Yeah, 80's not as old as it used to be.
Oh, yes, it is. Don't let anybody ever tell you that. Absolutely it is, yeah. It is, but you know, I'm keeping busy, and I think that's a big difference between being 80 and not having anything to do and being 80 and keeping busy.
Yeah, but when you were a kid, or when I was a kid, somebody who was 80 was in a rocking chair usually, right?
Or probably dead.
Right.
You know, I mean, that's another thing to think about, and certainly go into that in the book, the issue of mortality. But no, you're right. Listen, when we were kids, somebody who was 30, depending on how old we were, was old, or 35. But people are living longer. You know, one of the people who helped me with some of the stuff in the book is John Morley. He's a gerontologist here at SLU. And he's predicting, and he's very worldwide respected, the guy's really good. He is predicting that kids born today will probably live to be 120 years old. And when you stop to think about the implications of that with regard to health care and other kinds of care and all sorts of issues that will be arise as a result of that longevity. I mean, people will have dementia for 40 years instead of 4, that sort of thing. It's
yeah, it used to be you retired at 65, you were dead at 68.
That's right, that's right.
I don't know what happens if you retire at 65 and you live to be 120.
No, and that is the issue. I mean, you think of the problems that's going to generate. Providing care for people like that, they're going to live to be 120. It doesn't mean they're going to be, you know, running high hurdles or anything like that. They're going to be old and acting and reacting accordingly.
Response to the book? I know plenty of people have probably read it already and commented on it.
Yeah, it's been an interesting response. One of the things that I wanted to make clear is that it's not all for old people. You know, I want young people to read this too. Number one, to something to look forward to, know what's coming for them, but also to understand what their parents and grandparents might be going through. I mean, we look at people and we kind of make fun sometimes of older people because of the way they walk, the way they talk, the way they dress, that sort of thing. There does seem to be a number of changes that take place as we get old. We don't worry so much about how we dress ourselves. We do worry about forgetting things. But you mentioned what people are reacting to. I did a thing in Washington, Missouri recently, and it was an older group. And at the end of it, a couple of people came up to me and said, thanks for being out here today and telling us that we're not going through what we're going through by ourselves, that everybody seems to, at a certain age, start to experience some of the things that we're talking about, the aches and pains, in particular, health issues, you know, concerns about outliving whatever resources you might have. Those aren't funny things, but I think you can look at them through a different lens and maybe get a more humorous outlook. Another thing that comes into play, I think, is the issue of dignity. There are certain things that happen when you need to be cared for instance, that none of us would like to go through. One of the things I mention in the book is the issue of taking the car away. You know, this is something that I had to do with my mother-in-law, my wife and I. It was very, very hard for us to do it. It was even harder on her to have the car taken away. She just wasn't capable of driving any longer. Yeah. This happens a lot. And this is one of those issues where I think young people should understand that this is a problem and that it has a certain psychological impact.
If you had your best advice for those of us who are, entering or already there, what's the advice?
It would be to keep busy, to have something to do and have some place to go every day, as long as you can. I think that when people, I've known so many people, Jim, and you probably have too, who have looked forward to that day to retire and get in the RV and travel around the country, and then come back home and the traveling is over, they go on the back porch, put their feet up, and within a short period of time, they're dead because they don't have anything to do. There's no motivation. I ran into a guy, and I won't mention his name, but you would know him. He's a former salesman at Channel 2. And he made a lot of money. And he retired, and he traveled around the world, came home, and then traveled around the world again, and then woke up one day. I met him at Sam's. He had one of those red aprons on, and he was helping customers. And he was embarrassed to see me dressed as he was, because I had known him during his glory days, if you will. And he, by way of explanation as to what he was doing there, said, "Don, I've done everything I ever wanted to do. I've traveled the world and I've played golf and all the rest of it." And he said, "I woke up one morning and realized there are 365 days in the year, and that, I didn't have anything to do or plan for any of them." He said, "So I came down here and I do it 4 or 5 days a week. I interact with people, which is what I did during my entire professional career. And I'm happy. I have a mission every day." And I think it's terrifically important. If you don't have that, I think you're basically giving up.
Well, you're doing something every day where you've got to have a conversation with a wide variety of people every single day.
Yeah.
On the one sense, that's kind of a grind. On the other hand, it probably keeps you on your toes.
It's keeping me alive, for one thing, and it is. I mean, I spend a lot of time doing research, as you well know. Well, you just don't walk in and start talking to people. You have to know a little something about the subject matter when you do it. Yeah, so I'm doing what I've done all of my life, is researching stories, is what it boils down to. I'm sure it's keeping me alive, and so far I only forget my keys 3 or 4 times a day.